Hey everybody, it's Brian with Retired 40. Welcome back to the kitchen. I just got back from a place that I have a real love-hate relationship with, and that is Costco. And I love it because it's kind of a freeze dryer or prepper's paradise because you just have massive quantities of bulk foods. But on the other hand, I hate it because it's always busy. It takes forever to check out, and you just know that you're gonna walk out of there with a $300 or $400 bill. But Costco and freeze drying kind of go really hand in hand with each other. And if you really know what you're looking for, you can get great deals on it as well. So make sure your membership is up to date. Grab your oversized shopping cart because today we're freeze drying my favorite things from Costco. So today, like many other of my video days, is just a giant experiment. Most of this stuff I have not freeze dried before. Some of it I've heard people rave about, and other things I'm really just kind of curious to see what happens. So my favorite things from Costco, I love the rotisserie chicken. For like $6 you get an entire rotisserie chicken. It's already cooked. And if you're not careful, you can eat the whole thing by yourself. The biggest thing that I'm worried about in this is you can see all of that grease at the bottom. So we're gonna have to do something to address all that. The next thing we're gonna do are these Famous Dave's spicy pickles. And if you remember back to my veggie chip video, I really liked the pickles and it's a real hit with our family. But I don't like the ones that I used. They were really, really salty, and it just like, it intensified the saltiness when we freeze dried them. Even though I said on the video that it didn't, after having it a few different times, I really think that it does intensify the saltiness. So these are a little bit sweeter version. They're not so salty, and then they have a little spice too. So I'm real curious to see how those turn out. And kind of going along with that same thing, I'd really like to do some olives. Costco has some really great olives, and they're stuffed olives. I've never done an olive before. So one of my new favorites is garlic. And at Costco, you can pick up these already peeled garlic. It's the whole clove. Something else that I have never tried, and I don't really have a good reasoning why, are mushrooms. And I just think they'd be really handy just to be able to throw these in as an ingredient. I really like the Costco lasagnas. It's $13 for 2 of them. This will feed a whole army of people. And if we can get a way for these to freeze dry when they're already cooked and be able to rehydrate them well, you'd have an instant meal. I saved the best for last. Going through the Facebook groups, all I see people talking about are these Costco pumpkin pies. And I've never had one before, but they're $6 for this huge, this is an oversized pumpkin pie. And I have had pumpkin pie freeze dried before that was homemade, but not the Costco. And with Thanksgiving just right around the corner, we're gonna give this a try today. Since the lasagna is the only thing that actually needs to be cooked first, I'm gonna get the oven going on 375. We're gonna cook that. And I noticed something really cool about the lasagna. It should fit right on the tray, almost perfect. And since I'm right here, I'm just gonna go ahead and cut our pumpkin pie. Let's see if I can get this to work today. It hasn't been working. Oh, nice. So on this second tray, I'm gonna do our olives, and I actually went ahead and threw them in a strainer and I rinsed them off just to kind of get rid of some of that saltiness, since I feel like it does intensify the saltiness a little bit. I think some diced garlic would go nice on this tray, and our oven's ready, so I'm gonna stick this lasagna in so that can cook while we're finishing up the rest of this. This garlic is pretty awesome. And if you saw my video on the garlic, when I freeze dried my garlic out of my garden, it really changed my perspective on garlic. So on these whole cloves, we just need to cut them in half so the water has a place to escape, and then these can go straight onto the tray. Another thing that might be real interesting with these is if you did some roasted garlic and roasted them and did the same thing, where you could actually make them into a powder or just as a quick ingredient. 3 pounds of garlic, that ought to last a while. So while I'm in the spirit of slicing and dicing, I'm just gonna do my mushrooms on this tray as well. I think you could do mushrooms a few different ways, but I would think the most practical way is to dice them. Next, let's get this chicken going, and I think what I'm gonna do is cover this with some paper towels. We're gonna try and get all of this grease that we can off just by dripping. Meats will do fine. They do a lot better if they're cooked and the fat is rendered. But anytime you can get some grease or fat away from what you're freeze drying, the better chance you have of long-term food storage. And let's face it, most of us don't need the extra fat. So I'm gonna double down here, and I'm actually gonna put a paper towel at the bottom of the tray just to absorb anything extra that lands on there. But I'm gonna separate the skin and the meat just to see what difference it makes. Look at all that good food. Still got an empty one though. Lasagna's done. I see one thing that's a little bit concerning to me is it does have a lot of oil that's kind of gathering in the side. I'm gonna try and get as much of that as I can out of here. Well, it looks delicious. I'm a little concerned about the oil levels on here, but I'm hoping as it freezes and kind of dries out that it will absorb into there. And I also noticed in the ingredients that there is no funky stuff in here. It's all like regular stuff that you can just buy at the store. There's no words in there that you can't pronounce or weird chemicals. All right, we'll get all these frozen and we can reconvene in the morning. Everything's frozen solid. Our machine is cooled down to a brisk -32. Oh, I mean 32. But I am excited for all this delicious food, especially this pumpkin pie. All right, I'll see you shortly, probably in about 25 to 30 hours is my guess. I also wanted to let everyone know that we opened a new freeze drying group. It's through the site MeWe. It's a newer social media, but it's sort of the anti-Facebook, no spyware, no BS, no ads, no agenda, pretty much everything that Facebook is not. We've had a lot of people say that they don't want to use Facebook. So in order to accommodate everyone's great ideas and recipes and successes and failures, we'll keep the Facebook group open, but we also have MeWe. So feel free to hop on one or the other or both, and there's the same great people, same great ideas, same great everything. So to join the MeWe group, go to MeWe and search Retired at 40 Freeze Drying Group, or I'll put a link down in the description. And if you want to join the Facebook group, that information will be down in the description as well as some other great info. Hey, welcome back. We're all done this time, I think. We're at 31 hours and 45 minutes. It's a little bit louder in here than it was last time because I've got the old guy running over here with the old school pump that obviously was a lot louder than the new ones are. Ooh, there's some really interesting stuff in here. We're gonna start off with the toughest ones to reconstitute, which are gonna be the lasagna and the chicken and also the pumpkin pie. And I haven't used my bamboo steamer for a really long time, and I think this is an ideal situation for it. So those three are going to take a little bit to rehydrate, so let's look at them first and then we'll get them going. There is a little bit of grease on the very top of this, I would imagine from the cheese. And you can see just a little bit of residue on my fingers from it. That's a little bit of a concern as far as long-term food storage goes. I think one possible solution to the grease is if you put this through a whole cycle and you actually pull this out when it says it's done, blot as much grease off as you can, and then stick it in for another 8 to 10 hours. I think you could probably at least get this to store for a good amount of time. I don't know about 15 or 20 years, but I think that would definitely help with being able to store it for a little bit longer period. So this piece right here is still nice and intact. Looks the way that it should. We're gonna put that in our first bamboo tray, and then we're gonna work on the chicken. So this chicken, I actually took the skins, if you remember, I freeze dried them separately from the rest of the chicken because of that same problem that I think the skins are gonna have a pretty good grease content. But now that they've sat for a bit, they look decent. I don't know, I'm not sure why really. Let's see what the chicken looks like. Chicken, in my experience, always does really well. This chicken was also, just the meat of the chicken was pretty greasy. It looks really good, it's very dry. And next, let's check out our pumpkin pie, the much anticipated. The pumpkin pie freeze dried really, really well. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I think most people are probably grinding this up and using it as a topping, for ice cream, or they'll throw it in their coffee or something like that, because this stuff is very, very hard. And the way it sits right now, It's almost too hard to eat, but man, is it really good. It reminds me of Golden Grahams cereal, if you remember Golden Grahams cereal. But check out that cool texture. So the way this bamboo steamer works, so it allows the steam to actually travel through all these layers, but it will actually hold a little bit of moisture. And from level to level, it has holes in there that will allow steam to come through. The reason why that's important for certain types of food when we're rehydrating is that it will allow it to rehydrate very slowly. Some foods just don't do well dipping them in water or just adding hot water to them. I'll put a link in the description of this bamboo steamer. So I'm just going to let this hang out here for a little bit. I'll check it every once in a while just to see how it's doing. In the meantime, we are going to check out the rest of what we have. Next, let's check out the garlic, olives, pickles, and mushrooms. So these are all going to be pretty exciting for me. Here's our olives. Those certainly don't look as appetizing. All right, here it goes. It freeze-dried really nice. So I mentioned our pickles that we tried a couple weeks ago, and I said that we used these Famous Dave's ones instead because they weren't as salty. They were more of a sweet version. And those I could eat a whole bunch of. One thing I did notice on these pickles, and I don't know if they just need a little bit more dry time, but they are still bendy in the middle, and that could be from the sugar content, or it could just be that it needed a little bit more dry time. But as far as these particular ones, these would be awesome for a short-term snack. And really, to get a decisive answer on this, I'd have to do an entire batch of just these pickles. I really like them. I'm gonna try out these mushrooms next, and I'm really stoked about these mushrooms because mushrooms are one of those things that you buy and if you don't get them used fast enough, they get really bad and they're just unusable. But these dried super, super dry and they stayed really plump. And I've been doing this long enough that I can always tell you before I even rehydrate most of the time whether it's going to work or not. And I think mushrooms are going to be spot on as soon as you rehydrate them. We're going to put that to the test in a second. These look really, really good. They have a really interesting texture, freeze-dried actually. Different than anything else I've had freeze-dried. Everything so far would make a really good snack if you wanted to put together just as kind of a snack mix. The last thing we have on this plate is our whole garlic cloves. I've done the garlic before. I really like the minced garlic. I keep it in a jar, just sitting on the countertop, so when we're cooking we can just grab what we need. This isn't vacuum sealed, it's just in an airtight jar. And this does fine just like this for long periods of time. I think the best play for this whole garlic is either keep it whole and use it in recipes if you need whole cloves, or you throw it in a food processor and make your own garlic powder. So the smell that's coming off of this is super intense. You're not gonna get that kind of smell from store-bought garlic powder. So side by side, this is the store-bought, and then there's our fresh. And I can tell you just from the way it smells, this one is gonna have way more garlic flavor, probably get a lot more mileage out of it. The next thing I wanna do is actually rehydrate them with just some water just to see how they rehydrate. So we're gonna do all four at the same time. I think that the key with rehydrating this is not letting it sit in here too long, and it also is going to depend on what you're using it for. If you're putting it into a soup or something like that, you know, it's not really gonna matter at all. But if you need it to stay somewhat crisp, then that will definitely make a difference. So just after being in here for just a matter of, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, mushrooms are almost instant, and those are gonna be awesome. That's one of my new favorites, I think. But those mushrooms, just a quick bath and they're good to go. Pickles, they actually have a little bit of crunch still. These are gonna get real soggy though if you leave them in here too long. The garlic and the olives, they've been sitting here for about 5 minutes and they are taking in water real slow. So I'm gonna check back in on the lasagna now that it's ready, and then we'll come back to this. Okay, so I just checked on the pumpkin pie. It's softening up. Surprisingly, I can't believe it. I thought as hard as that stuff was, I didn't think it would work. I think we're gonna get it to pretty close to where it was when we put it in there. The lasagna, however, I'm not so sure about. The quicker version, I think, is going to be to put it in a pan or to put it in a baking dish in the oven. So after about 10 minutes, this one is almost done, and then I also put one in a saucepan and then covered it with just a little watered down tomato sauce. Our pumpkin pie has been in for about half an hour, and it's as done as it's gonna get, I think, but this actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. It's not perfect, it's a little spongy, but I thought there was no way this was gonna come back. But it did pretty good. It's a little bit darker colored. It's not too bad. It's a lot chewier. It's not quite as soft as when we put it in there, but I think any longer in the bamboo steamer and it was just gonna start to get a crust on this outside and kind of get burned. I do think the best thing for this is if you ground this up, used it as a spice or a topping, or if you just added it to some recipes or something. I think that'd be a great way if it was powdered. Okay, let's check out our 3 options of lasagna. In the steamer, it did not fare too well. It looks like it got pretty burnt. I think the best way for chicken is just throw it into a recipe like you normally do. We've done a million videos on chicken already, so I'm not gonna try that another way. We know that works just fine, just not in the bamboo steamer. The most important thing on the chicken is that we know that it freeze dries from Costco. Pan fried with just some water in, it flattened out. I do think it worked very well. The best in a saucepan, and then if you want a little added bonus, just throw in some tomato sauce or some pizza sauce and rehydrate it in that. So the bamboo steamer, it looks more like a brownie than it does lasagna. I don't think I'm gonna try this, but I know who will. So I did realize after I shot that I'd ran the bamboo steamer completely out of water, which is part of the reason why it burned so much. And I do think in the lasagna and the bamboo steamer's defense, I think if that had not happened, it would have rehydrated quite a bit better. Pan fried. It looks good. It's edible. I would say it's a little tough in where the cheese was at, and the cheese is real thick on the top. The ricotta and the pasta all rehydrated nice. I wouldn't turn that down if I was starving. The last one, it looks the best, and I would guess that it came out the best. It's nice and tender. My wife is so smart. She's the one that told me to do this. But this one is a little hot. But it rehydrated, I would say, it's hot. This one rehydrated, I would say about 95%. And it rehydrates a lot quicker. So the smallest pan you can fit into whatever your serving size is gonna be. Let's check back in on our olives and our garlic. These have been hanging out for almost about a half an hour now. And the olives, they are finally starting to take in some moisture, but they're still pretty dry. I do think over time they will absorb all of the moisture and they would be good. I think the best play with those would be to just throw them back into the olive jar freeze-dried and then rehydrate them with vodka. And then our garlic is kind of the same story. It seems like it is taking in some water, very slow, softening up just a little bit, but I do think over time it will soften back up. I think the best thing to do with this garlic is what we did a second ago with the garlic powder. I really like this. I like the texture of it is almost like flour, not garlic, which is really cool. I think the flavor is way more intense than anything you can buy in the store. And then we also like to just mince this in the food processor and then throw it into recipes when you need it because this size will rehydrate as you're cooking. All right, that's a wrap. Well, today was a big win. So even though it's 10 o'clock here, I'm gonna have a celebration with some freeze-dried olives. This is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.